I am out of gas. Those four words might seem oddly simple, but when they come from the man who led the modern Spider-Man saga to dazzling box office highs, you cannot help but stop in your tracks. Yes, we are talking about filmmaker Jon Watts, the creative force behind three blockbuster web-slinger hits, who made waves the moment he revealed just how drained he felt after completing his cinematic marathon through the Spider-Man universe. What exactly did he mean by running on empty, and how did it ultimately lead him to bow out of a project as massive as the Fantastic Four? Today, we are diving headfirst into this story of sudden changes, creative pressures, and the promise of new beginnings. Along the way, we will also unravel intriguing behind-the-scenes details. Did the pandemic-era protocols rattle his stamina more than anyone anticipated? Will the next iteration of the Fantastic Four be able to fill the gap left by his departure? And what is really going on with that hush-hush Star Wars project that Jon Watts has been cooking up with Jude Law? Perhaps the best place to start is with that jolting confession. I am out of gas. Imagine that moment for a second. You have just delivered one of the most successful conclusions to a trilogy in recent memory, bridging multiple eras of web-slinging heroes into a single mind-bending adventure. The entire world is still buzzing about the emotional arcs and cameo surprises. Then, out of nowhere, you admit that your creative tank is on empty. The truth is, no matter how exciting it may be to direct a beloved Marvel property, the toll of orchestrating everything during a high-stakes pandemic environment can be immense. Keeping your cast and crew safe under life-or-death cautionary measures, while also meeting the stratospheric expectations of fans, is a monumental endeavor. Jon Watts found himself in exactly that position, a global superstar director, fatigued from one of the largest productions on the planet. But before we dig deeper into the tough decision he made next, let me bring up a question. Have you ever found yourself so drained by an overwhelming project that you thought, I have to step away, even if this is my dream job? That kernel of relatability is part of what makes this story so compelling. Even in the bejeweled corridors of Hollywood, people get worn out just like you and me. Yet I promise we will go further than lofty talk. We will investigate the reasons behind his decision, uncover how Marvel Studios took the news, and also peek at the future of these big franchise titles. Get ready to see how a titan of cinematic imagination navigates personal well-being and professional ambitions. In the swirl of speculation, many fans were taken aback to learn that Jon Watts departed from the Fantastic Four reboot. After all, he had been all set to lead the new iteration of Marvel's beloved cosmic explorers to the big screen. The dating was even lined up, a midsummer splash, expected by countless fans longing to see how the Marvel Cinematic Universe would handle those iconic characters. Except Jon Watts surprised everyone by saying, in essence, I cannot do it anymore. If that does not pique your curiosity, maybe the pandemic angle will. While millions of people felt the direct stress of lockdowns, supply shortages, and a sense of global anxiety, imagine that pressure magnified by a big-budget film requiring elaborate special effects and international vendor collaboration. The usual challenge of weaving a powerful superhero story was suddenly overshadowed by the real possibility of risking people's health on set. With so many unknowns, that stress accumulated. The result? The creative mind behind Spider-Man's big successes walked away. And here is another twist. Rather than languishing in a post-superhero slump, he kept himself very busy. Did you know that he went on to direct something called Wolves for Apple, starring none other than Brad Pitt and George Clooney? This abrupt genre pivot tells us something crucial about Watts' approach. Instead of chaining himself to the next big superhero spectacle, he gravitated toward fresh territory that might leave room for him to breathe and reignite his creative spark. Can you imagine turning down the chance to imprint your style on the Fantastic Four? And yet that is precisely what he did, mindful of his own limits. It is a pivotal moment that begs the question, what might have happened if he powered through anyway? Could a half-hearted push have done more harm to both him and the film's final outcome? The big question is, how did Marvel Studios react to losing a golden boy of their directorial stable? According to Watts, they were incredibly understanding. That in itself is quite telling. The pandemic had not just eaten away at him, but also turned the entire process of major film production into an exhaustive labyrinth. The studio recognized that forging ahead with a director who felt he had nothing left to give would only tarnish the final product. So, the baton passed to director Matt Shakman, a talent best known for his adept handling of episodic storytelling and cinematic flair. For fans, though, the real stinger is knowing that Fantastic Four: First Steps, planned for a date in late July, will be entering a new era without the man who gave fresh life to Spidey. It is worth noting that Jon Watts himself cannot wait to see Shackman's vision come to life, a testament that Hollywood can sometimes be a place of mutual respect rather than feuding egos. If you are enjoying these behind-the-scenes revelations, take a moment to let me know your thoughts. Perhaps you can show your support by hitting that like button. Sometimes, interacting with this content is the best way for us to keep delivering the deep dives you crave. Now, back to the story. We have only scratched the surface of Jon Watts' unexpected journey. You see, once his gas tank started refilling, he set his sights on a galaxy far, far away. Yes, he had already made his mark across the Marvel banner with impressive skill. Now the doors at Lucasfilm had opened for him. That is how the project Skeleton Crew emerged. A brand new Star Wars storyline featuring Jude Law, Skeleton Crew seemed like the perfect stage for Watts to explore his storytelling passions without the suffocating effect of the immediate spotlight that a major superhero film might bring. Of course, the Star Wars fandom can be intense on its own, but something about the cosmic tapestry of that galaxy has enticed countless filmmakers to push their creativity to new heights. Will there be more Star Wars chapters from Watts? He has been coy, refusing to say outright that he is planning multiple seasons or expansions, but his enthusiasm over the show and the iconic universe was palpable. He even admitted that if the door remains open, it is a corner of imagination he would happily explore. So, if the question is whether he might direct more big-budget sagas after stepping away from the Fantastic Four, the short answer is yes, provided the passion remains. But there is more. He also teased that he wants to do justice to Final Destination, a horror franchise in which he has participated as a producer and story contributor. And that is not the only unexpected direction Watts has gone in. Hollywood, with all its glitz and demands, remains open to him in ways that might surprise even the most dedicated fans. If you love hearing these lesser-known details about a director's path, you may want to subscribe so you do not miss any upcoming breakdowns. But let us not vanish from the core storyline just yet. Because to truly understand Jon Watts' current place in Hollywood, we have to address the notion that big studios can be creative draining machines. At least that is the reputation. In many cautionary tales, once you enter that pipeline, you have producers hovering, executives second-guessing your every choice, and myriad obligations that can stifle the soul of your project. Yet according to Watts, that assumption could not be farther from the truth, at least in his experience. He has gone on record to say that being a director in Hollywood is far more supportive and creatively forgiving than rumors suggest. Instead of top-down meddling, he found a network of encouraging producers who looked to him for leadership and a strong directorial vision. Could that be what fosters extraordinary success, especially in huge franchises where fan expectations can sometimes overshadow storytelling ambitions? Possibly. The synergy can lead to better results, or it can drive collaborators to exhaustion, depending on the circumstances. In his case, a global pandemic, the final stretch of a demanding trilogy, and the knowledge that the Fantastic Four would require equally enormous energy forced him to conclude it was time to step aside and leave the baton for someone else. Another piece of the puzzle is his perspective on artificial intelligence. In the ever-shifting technological landscape of Hollywood, a number of directors have begun using machine-generated aids to refine scripts, produce concept art, or streamline production tasks. Watts, however, expressed a kind of wariness about labeling everything as AI. Instead, he wants creators to approach the subject with nuance, underscoring that many of the so-called AI-driven technologies are in fact specialized tools requiring better comprehension by those who use them. He is not opposed to innovation, but he is open that he has no desire to replace the human heartbeat of filmmaking. The connection with a talented crew and genuine collaboration clearly fuels him more than any digital shortcuts ever could. In fact, let us delve deeper into that. You might wonder how these new technologies impact big productions that already rely heavily on computer-generated imagery and complicated post-production pipelines. Given that he described the supply chain woes of the pandemic, where completion houses and visual effects vendors span the globe, one might assume that he would be first in line to adopt advanced AI solutions. Yet part of what we have learned is that Watts is, if anything, loyal to the idea of an old-fashioned creative synergy that can feel intangible but ultimately yields a unique product. He has suggested that truly understanding these technological developments might be wise before blindly integrating them, especially if they might upend the human element that so often elevates even the simplest shot. All of this ties back to a critical question. Is big-budget filmmaking sustainable for directors who are sensitive to burnout? Hollywood is punctuated by tales of visionary directors stepping away from franchises because the sheer scale becomes suffocating. Jon Watts is hardly alone on that front, though his story stands out for how self-aware he appeared at precisely the moment of maximum success. Right after building a global phenomenon with Spider-Man, fishing up the synergy between multiple beloved eras of that character's cinematic history, he did not plunge headlong into the next golden opportunity. Instead, he threw up a caution sign and told the world he needed a break. That might be a blueprint for a new generation of filmmakers who strive to protect their mental well-being while also delivering blockbuster hits. Now, a conversation about Jon Watts would not be complete without touching on the successes of Final Destination. Bloodlines, a movie that soared to unexpected heights, financially and critically, in the horror sphere. Though not in the director's chair, Watts had an influential role in building the narrative concept of that film, fueling it with tension and paranoia that rang true for longtime franchise fans. Why is that relevant? Because it demonstrates how stepping away from a giant Marvel franchise does not mean stepping out of the cinematic ring altogether. He remains involved in various corners of the film universe, from heart-racing horror to enchanting science fiction. Rather than letting burnout push him underground, he pivoted toward projects that might fit better with his capacity and enthusiasm. That begs the question, what else might be in store for him? Rumors swirl that studios might one day want him to come back to superhero territory, possibly for future chapters involving other Marvel or even DC characters. There is no official confirmation, of course, but the demand for proven cinematic storytellers is high, and Watts has proven he can juggle a complicated tapestry of arcs, subplots, and big personalities with an apparent ease that belies the behind-the-scenes strenuousness. Yet for the moment, he appears satisfied focusing on new territory, like Star Wars or the Apple film featuring two of Hollywood's biggest stars. It is an intriguing shift that might eventually fuel yet another resurgence for the man who, by his own admission, needed to recharge in ways that no massive budget could fix. But let me toss out a final puzzle piece. We often talk about the unstoppable nature of Hollywood blockbusters, how they cater to existing franchises and cost hundreds of millions to produce, leaving smaller original films gasping for air in an industry geared toward event spectacles. On top of that, distribution patterns have changed. If a film does not break records in its opening weekend, it can be deemed a flop. As Watts has indicated, smaller films rarely get the runway to grow through strong word of mouth because the corporate machine is quick to shift screens to the next big thing. With that in mind, we might see the next evolutionary step for a director like Jon Watts, championing mid-scale pictures that tell fresh stories. One cannot help but wonder if that desire to see more original movies might push him to foster new scripts and new voices. Maybe that is the upside of stepping off the non-stop superhero treadmill. And it resonates beyond the glitz. Think about how many times you have wanted to see a refreshing, wholly original movie, only to find your local theater dominated by sequels, reboots, and spin-offs. Watts's comment about how we keep rehashing day-loop concepts like Groundhog Day suggests that he, like many, yearns for a wave of novel creativity. That might come in the form of championing up-and-coming filmmakers, or it might manifest in his decision to produce or direct concepts that break away from the formulaic blueprint. So, in a sense, stepping back from the Fantastic Four could also be the impetus for a shift that benefits the entire cinematic landscape, if that is the path he chooses to follow. By now, you might well be asking, how does a single individual balance the forces of big studios, personal well-being, the lure of new technologies, and the quest for originality? That just may be the central question for modern directors, especially those who hold the reins of beloved franchises. Our entire journey through Jon Watts' departure from Marvel's first family, his pivot to Star Wars, his thoughts on collaboration and AI, and his willingness to produce horror hits underscores a broader truth. The capacity to step back and reassess is not a weakness, but a vital strength. He recognized the pandemic's effect on hours, logistics, and mental health, factoring all of that into a crucial creative decision for his future. The result? A director who might actually have more to give because he did not push himself past the breaking point. If that concept resonates with you, or if this entire saga left you on the edge of your seat, feel free to add your voice in a supportive comment or share this with someone who loves a good behind-the-scenes reveal. After all, Hollywood's grand illusions shine even brighter when we remember there are real people powering them, each with their own boundaries and dreams. Those boundaries are ultimately what keep the spark alive. Let us recap the main highlights of this odyssey. We started with the staggering realization that the mastermind behind a trio of globally adored Spider-Man films was out of gas. We discovered how pandemic protocols compounded creative strain, forcing him to juggle epic set pieces, visual effects, houses scattered around the world, and the dire need to keep everyone safe. We revealed how Marvel Studios reacted supportively, allowing him to make what might be the hardest choice of all, stepping away from a career-defining offer. Then there was the next act, a foray into Star Wars territory, where Jon Watts found new energy to weave fresh stories for a galaxy that thrives on wonder and bold visions. And running in parallel were side pursuits like Final Destination, Bloodlines, exemplifying his range and thirst for narrative variety. Amid all of this, perhaps the most humanizing angle is his reflection on how big-budget Hollywood actually gave him freedom rather than constraints, and how he now hopes more original mid-range films can find their place in theaters. No matter what side of the cinematic fence you stand on, be it a hardcore superhero devotee or a lover of small indie gems, there is something reassuring in hearing a film maestro openly advocate for a broader, richer movie-going experience. Maybe that is a clue to what we can expect next from him and the broader industry. More daring creative moves, more thoughtful pacing for big-stakes productions, and an insistence that behind every extraordinary film stands a team of human beings who need rest, inspiration, and personal passion to fuel their artistry. Curiosity still abounds. Will the Fantastic Four first steps dazzle audiences under Matt Shakman's guidance, forging a fresh route for Marvel's iconic family? One hopes so. The Cosmic Adventurers deserve a spectacular big-screen reintroduction, but that is one reveal we will need patience to see. And what if the success of Skeleton Crew catapults Jon Watts into more Star Wars projects, or triggers a massive wave of collaborative spin-offs? Could we see a new golden era of boundary-pushing storytelling in that galaxy far, far away? Countless questions beckon, and you can bet that as soon as answers emerge, we will be here, unraveling them one by one. For now, the biggest lesson might just be that stepping away from a golden opportunity for the sake of personal well-being can end up fueling an even more vibrant creative path. Remarkably, in these labyrinthine corridors of high-stakes franchise filmmaking, Jon Watts serving as an example might encourage other visionaries to do the same. Then we all benefit, from directors who are not drained, from cast and crew who feel supported, and from final products that bristle with imaginative energy. It is a balancing act, to be sure. But if Hollywood truly thrives on reinvention, what better reinvention could there be than rethinking how a blockbuster gets made? The next time a headlining director drops out of a major film, remember this saga. Rather than seeing it simply as a red flag, consider the possibility that creative minds need space to breathe in order to deliver the kind of jaw-dropping experiences we flock to theaters for. After all, the reason we line up for epic blockbusters is to be transported, to witness stories that blow our minds and tug our emotions. That level of craft demands fresh eyes and hearts that are all in. So, here is hoping that Jon Watts, once recharged, continues to grace us with artful, maybe even risky, cinematic leaps. And maybe the next time you feel yourself on the brink, you will think of those 4 loaded words he shared: I am out of gas. Because sometimes stepping away is not the end of the story, but the prologue to something bigger and better than we could have ever imagined. We have traveled far through the highlights and mysteries of Jon Watts' unexpected choice. Whether you are a fervent Marvel aficionado, a lifelong Star Wars loyalist, a Final Destination adrenaline seeker, or someone who simply enjoys exploring the creative undercurrents that shape Hollywood's blockbusters, this story resonates with universal themes of exhaustion and renewal. What started as a shock, a successful director walking away at a pivotal moment, may ultimately become a model for balancing personal passion with professional demands. The only thing left to do is wait and see what marvels he will conjure next. Until then, Keep your eyes on that horizon, because in Hollywood, you never know which brilliant vision will materialize, and which breakthroughs are only possible once a creator has allowed themselves the time to refill their tank.